Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am still on vacation, but I'm excited to bring you this previously aired episode with one of our Child Nexus members, Shelley Lawrence. She discusses how parents and educators can collaborate to help students thrive. Perfect timing as we prepare for the transition back to school. For many parents, it can be hard to hear that your child has been struggling in school. And for other parents who've made the step to have their child assessed, they can sometimes struggle with sharing those assessment results with the school. Today, I'm going to talk about the parent and educator collaboration. My guest today is Shelley Lawrence. As an independent school administrator for 2 decades, Shelley had the unique experience of working with families of students who are striving to succeed in school, and she is adamant in her belief that with the proper supports in place, all children can succeed in school. Shelley brings her passion for children, her strong connections with outside providers in the community, her keen observation and listening skills, and her understanding of the complexities of learning to help families navigate the school journey with their child. I can't wait for you to hear this episode.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Shelley. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Karen. Good morning.
It's so good to see you.
And good to see you.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation because this is the topic that we're going to be discussing today is that parent and educator collaboration. And it's so important. Every conversation I have with a parent following an evaluation, before an evaluation, that parent educator collaboration is key. And we talk about that even during the process of doing the evaluations that I do. I'm gathering information from educators about how kids are doing in school. Sometimes the educators are the ones who send kids to us to get assessed. And, you know, that relationship is so important. And I wanted to have you on the podcast because you have unique insight into the parent educator relationship. And before we logged on, we said it's important to talk about. And so again, I'm just so glad you're here to have this conversation with me.
Me too, because it's really one of my favorite topics to discuss.
You know, we've been talking on this podcast about children who think and learn differently. And I and other professionals who I've spoken with often have parents who come in, we share information about a child's diagnosis. And you know, sometimes parents are reluctant to share that information with the school because there's a fear of stigma about the school sharing the information with other schools, particularly if a child is transitioning from an elementary school to a middle school or from middle school to high school. I would love for you to talk about kind of you in your former position as a school administrator, how important it is to have that information and then what you do with that information.
For sure. So I look at the neuropsychological evaluation as a roadmap, and it's really information. I didn't really care about a diagnosis. I was looking for recommendations, accommodations we could make at school to help the child learn to the best of his or her ability. I always reassured parents that whatever they shared with me or the school is private. It doesn't go into their cumulative record. And it's simply a roadmap. It allows us to say, okay, we're going to try X. We try X. We come back together. Oh, this is really working. Now let's add something else in. It's really about having all the information necessary to do our best job to educate the child.
And I think that's so important because what I often tell parents is that it's not about the diagnosis, like you said. It's really the whole purpose of doing this is not to come up with a diagnosis. The purpose is to better understand why a child has been struggling at school, on the playground, at home, because then once we know that information, then we can know how to intervene and how to support children. And if at school, you don't know why a child is struggling with math or with reading, with communication, then it's hard for you to know how to teach and how to support.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that parents forget is we as educators are also looking to know, where are the child's strengths and how strong are they? And how can we use those strengths to leverage weaker areas? And I've had many, many times where I've had a child have a neuropsych evaluation, and there's an area of strength that pops out that is so strong. And we're able to really, as a school, really capitalize on that strength and build that strength. And that's just a magical experience.
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. And that also points to the idea that it's not about just identifying what's wrong. You're really getting, like you said, a profile of strengths and weaknesses. And I'd love for you to kind of share an example of how you use strengths to kind of, and I often tell parents, kids are often able to use their strengths to compensate for areas of weakness. And how does that specifically help teachers to have that information?
It helps teachers tremendously. So I'm thinking of one child, one of my favorite all-time little boys, and I remember him when he was in kindergarten. He's now in middle school. And he had a whole host of struggles with processing language, producing language. And oh boy, was he strong in math and analytical reasoning. I mean, off the charts. And we worked together, the classroom teacher, the advanced learning teacher, and we came up with an independent study for him. And we used that independent study to help bolster his expressive language skills. So he got to study an area he was really intrigued by, the Seattle Space Needle. And then he got to report to the class, and it really bolstered his self-esteem. And this was in third grade. And it was a real turning point for him, because all of a sudden you saw him you started seeing him playing basketball and integrating more with the group. So that's just one very simple example.
And it's a really great example because, again, it speaks to what that experience is like for that child. Because it's not only about providing this information for educators, but, we have feedback sessions in our practice with the child to help them understand their strengths and things that are harder for them. That's how we kind of phrase it. These are the things you do really well. This is a little harder for you. And these are some things that we can do to make those areas stronger. And like you said, with that comes, a bolster of self-esteem, and confidence in the things that they really do well and the things that they're working on to get better at.
I mean, kids know when they're struggling. They know. And I think every child comes to school wanting and deserving to be known and cared for. And to be truly known and cared for in a classroom is to have a teacher who understands your learning profile. For some kids, it's pretty easy to figure out their learning profile. For other kids, it's really trickier. And those strengths aren't so apparent at first, or the weaknesses are hiding under. And once the child knows, you notice a freedom about them to really feel cared for in school and to do their best learning.
And that's so important to convey to parents as well. And I think that's where that collaboration between parents and teachers is so important, because I think as a parent, if I know that my child's teacher feels that way about my child, then I'm more likely to trust that person with my child's well-being in the classroom, and trust that if I'm giving them information about a private evaluation, that they're going to use that information to help my child. And sometimes that assessment comes from the school district. And there may even be hesitancy about requesting, I'm thinking about the public schools, requesting an IEP. They may have had a diagnosis by their pediatrician and not requesting that 504 plan because they're afraid of the stigma and they're afraid about how their child might be perceived.
I mean, I've been through that a lot as an administrator. I've sat in on tons of IEP meetings. I've had parents who have been hesitant to do it. And what I have found is once they really pursue the IEP and get the accommodations that their child is entitled to. It's like running, I liken it to running a marathon with asthma and not having an inhaler with you. It's next to impossible. A simple 504 plan for a child struggling with weak attentional controls can make all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they can do much better learning.
Right. And they're really able to show what it is they're able to do, because sometimes that, again, gets hidden because of some of the struggles that they're experiencing. So we've talked about kind of parents who go out and get a private assessment or get a 504 plan or an IEP. And, in the case of the private assessment, they bring it to the school. But sometimes it's even hard for parents to agree to do the evaluation in the first place and that must be hard on the part of the teacher to say, your child is really struggling. I recommend an assessment. How do you broach that topic with parents? And what would you like parents to know about, when a teacher brings that as a suggestion to a parent, what they should be thinking about?
I really think, I've had many experiences with that in my very long tenure as an administrator. And what the message I try and get across to parents is that it is just information. You wouldn't go and remodel your house if you didn't know which walls were load-bearing walls, or it's really the same thing when the school is coming to you saying, gosh, I've tried X, Y, and Z, and your child just really isn't reading yet. We've tried all our tricks. We need your partnership. And it's really just getting them to understand that the neuropsych evaluation or the IEP is simply a roadmap for us. We don't care about a diagnosis. A diagnosis is meaningless.
Right.
And like I said, information is power.
It absolutely is. And I think it's almost like we have to have a separate podcast episode about the barriers to seeking an assessment, whether that be a private assessment, a 504 plan, an IEP, because that often results in a delay in getting a diagnosis or getting information that will help us better understand the struggle, which delays intervention.
Yes.
Which is problematic because we know kids do better when they get the intervention earlier.
Of course. It's like, for our children, going to school is their work. It's their work every day. And it would be very hard for us as adults to go to work every day if we had some need that was not being met.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, I think, a matter of basic respect to the child.
Absolutely. And I think as a parent, I think I want to normalize the experience of feeling when a teacher is telling you that your child is struggling with learning or struggling with reading, that you're just like, not my child. You know what I mean? I think that's a normal reaction, that there can't be anything wrong. But I think we have to rephrase the something wrong with, again, we want a better roadmap to better understand your child, not to identify what's wrong. But that first reaction is often, you're saying something's wrong with my child. And sometimes by extension, parents think that means I must not be doing something right, and often that reaction can delay, seeking an evaluation or asking for the help that your child might need.
I sometimes will try and say to parents, or I will say to parents, really the evaluation process is about finding out where the areas of strength are, how strong they are, where are some areas of weakness. We all have them. And how can we use those areas of strength to leverage the areas of weakness? And what else do we as teachers need to be doing?
Right.
And, I've seen families really be hesitant to do it and have their child really, really struggle. And when they finally do it and get the information and put the interventions in place, quite often they're like, oh my gosh, why did I wait so long?
I know. I've never had a parent say, I wish I hadn't have done this. I didn't do this. Every family that I've worked with has said, I'm so glad that I did this. I now understand my child better. I can now get my child the support he needs. And, again, I've had parents say that I wish I'd done this sooner, or they ask, should I have done this sooner? Because they feel that they missed the boat, but there's so much that we can do even when children are older. And so you transitioned out of academia, and now you're using all the skills that you learned from working with parents and educators to help families. And you describe yourself as a family's educational quarterback, which I love that. Exactly. Can you describe to our listeners what you mean by that?
Okay. So I'm the person you come to after you go to Karen or another neuropsychologist, or you have an IEP. And you're really looking at, whoa, there's a lot of information here. There sometimes can be tons of recommendations for the school, recommendations for the family. I'm the person who you can come to, who can help you prioritize outside recommendations, get you connected with great providers in the community. I'm also the person who can interface with the school and help you meet with the school on a regular basis to look at accommodations and modifications that the school is putting into place. How are those working? You don't want to do something that is not benefiting your child. And so it's like, oh, great. It really helps to have, the child take a test in a separate quiet room. Oh, no, that's not really making much of a difference. So it's really about open, clear, regular communication. And I really help facilitate that process.
And I think that prioritizing the recommendations is so important because I've written those reports. So I know what my list of recommendations looks like. And I've read other reports from clinical psychologists, from neuropsychologists, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists. And I know that parents are often like, I don't even know where to start. So that's why the feedback session that we have as psychologists are so important, because that's where we can prioritize. Because there's no feedback session that I've had with a family where I go through the entire list of recommendations. I'll say, these are the things you need to prioritize. You need to set up a meeting with the school and discuss these top 3 accommodations. You have to connect with an educational therapist for the reading intervention or an occupational therapist to work on fine motor. But oftentimes after they leave our office, they need that reiterated to them. They need someone to, again, coordinate that communication with the school. And it sounds like that's such a valuable resource that you're providing families as being that liaison.
Yeah. I mean, this is how I've looked at it for a very long time. As the parent, you've really taken the time, the financial investment to get these evaluations. You want to make sure that everyone's working together to benefit your child. I would say I used to have a round table in my office. I'm placing the child at the center of this table.
Oh, that's great.
It is what we are doing benefiting him or her. That's what matters. And really holding everyone accountable. Because if teachers are not doing what they need to be doing, someone needs to call them on it. And sometimes if parents are not, following up on their end, we need everyone to be working together.
Yes. And that team is so important. And that communication between members is so essential, particularly if you want to determine whether the intervention is affecting functioning, if it's causing improvement, if you're getting the response that you want. And you as an educator, you must see this too, is that you want to know if the intervention, particularly if it's happening outside the school, is impacting daily functioning and not just showing improvement in a therapy session. You want to know, is it helping at school, in the classroom, on the playground? not just during those sessions.
Yes, exactly. Is the child taking the reading intervention that they're getting outside of school, and are they starting to generalize that into the text they're reading in the classroom? I was fortunate enough to work at a school that had a very robust student services program. So whatever support we gave to a child in school, sometimes we divide and conquer. The educational therapist might be working on, I don't know, high frequency words or really some other nitty gritty phonics pieces. We might be working on fluency or just really on that fluency piece.
And that's where that communication comes in, because it's not, you talk about that round table, and you want the person, if they have an educational therapist outside of school or they're working with, a center, you want that center, that educational therapist, to be communicating with teachers. Isn't that what teachers want? Or is that not the case? Because sometimes parents are afraid, to ask teachers to do more because we know that they're already doing so much. But it sounds like teachers want the information.
100%. Teachers want to help. They go into this business to help children. And when they have tools, I'm thinking of a child who had trouble with expressive language and was working with a really fabulous speech and language pathologist. And she would give the teacher, like sentence starters to use with this child to get them to say more or clarify their questions. It was transformational. It wasn't any big deal. And teachers want to help.
They do. They absolutely do. And again, that particularly if a child has more than one area of struggle, that cross-disciplinary communication, like you've described the speech and language pathologist, I talked about the educational therapist, the teacher, the parents. I mean, all of those individuals need to be communicating, and because you want to track a child's progress. So, after parents have an assessment done, whether that be an IEP, whether that be a 504 plan implemented, whether that be a private assessment, what can they expect? What should they expect from the school in terms of implementing recommendations? Because you've been on the side of the educator and you also help parents as their liaison. So what should parents expect from the school after they sit down and the school has read the report? I'm assuming they've read the report.
I would give it to the school to read, and I would expect there to be a meeting and really to go over areas of strength and weakness. And sometimes we'd even have the neuropsychologist at that meeting with us, and really to prioritize what the school is going to commit to, what the family is going to commit to, and coming up with a plan to meet in 6 to 8 weeks to say, okay, this is what we're noticing now. How is it going at school? It's about taking the temperature. Is the child improving? How do we know? What are we noticing? Right.
That is so, and that meeting is so important. And I've had schools invite me to that meeting, and it's been really great to have. I think the best meetings I've sat in on are those meetings where the teachers are there, the head of the school is there, the parents are there, and any other clinician who is working with that child, whether it be a speech and language pathologist, an occupational therapist, ed therapist, is also in the room. And I'm giving the results, and everybody is in that room getting the same information, and they're on the same page in terms of prioritizing recommendation services. And that is like one of the best experiences I have, because I know that everyone is taking the information and there's a plan for moving forward, and everybody is on board with that plan.
Yeah. And from the educator side of it, Karen, it's so fulfilling. You feel like, wow, we're doing good work here. We're helping a child. And, I've been around in the school for a long time. And what's fabulous is to see kids who have really maybe had some areas of weakness when they were younger and got really good intervention, how they often take off and just do amazing things. It's such a rewarding feeling.
It's so rewarding. It is so rewarding. And that kind of what I was thinking about, the next step is after that initial meeting and that 6 to 8 weeks has passed or longer. Like, how do you as educators assess whether a child is progressing? What should parents expect in terms, and we know that there are individual differences for each child in terms of how long that process will take, what that looks like. But what are some things that you are looking for? Because I always tell parents to look past just the goals in an IEP.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes your own observations can be very enlightening. And I can think of an example, a parent who said that a child was struggling with reading, had worked with a tremendous educational therapist. The school was on board providing support. And the child went from always wanted to read chapter books. And she was in the 3rd grade and couldn't read chapters books because she couldn't get through the text, and now was able to read chapter books. And I think that is a marker of progress.
Huge.
Yes.
Huge. So children who have difficulty with graphomotor skills or fine motor skills, and writing can often be a really arduous task for them. Once they start to get some intervention, we'll come to the writing workshop with greater sense of purpose, relaxation, oftentimes having a plan for how to get their writing done. I've seen children who have difficulty with social cognition or social skills, and they've been part of a social skills group or working with an outside psychotherapist, and all of a sudden doing a better job integrating into the games at recess. It's really about it's about observing the child. And sometimes a parent will say, oh, wow, my child is so much more excited to come to school every day. And that says it all.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And sometimes it's a smile on a child's face when they're in school, just being a child who didn't say much about their day, now expanding on their experiences throughout the day. And like you said, it's just so rewarding to hear those stories and to see that, to make those observations.
Yeah, or a little girl who couldn't read, and then all of a sudden she could, and they're walking through the hallway, not so safe all the time, but reading a book as they're walking.
Right.
It's
yes.
fabulous.
It is fabulous. It is fabulous. And we all love when we see that progress and we know the interventions are working. And there are some kids who respond a little more slowly to the intervention, and they don't progress the way we would expect. And, when you sit back down with parents and with educators during a follow-up meeting and you're not seeing the progression that you would like, what are some things that you look at or that you recommend for families? And I know, again, this is going to differ depending on what the struggle is, but what are some things that the parents can expect? Because sometimes parents can be disappointed because they expected significant progress and they're not seeing it.
So yeah, that can happen too. Sometimes, I'm going to give 2 examples. Sometimes when we send a child to occupational therapy for those fine motor skills, it can be a slow go. And if we still see a child really struggling, we might partner with the OT and work together to try some different interventions in the classroom. We might start adding in some typing practice, knowing that we're so lucky to have these bypass mechanisms to help kids who have dysgraphia. We're lucky that we're living in that way in 2021, that we have technology to assist us. For children who are struggling to read, I'm thinking of a child that I've had lots of experience where reading has been really challenging for this child. And, we've had the educational therapist, might have been doing, Wilson, switch to maybe try a different program. We might, while the educational therapist is working on the phonics, we might really take a stab at school at the sight words and really target that. So we don't expect instant, things to be instantaneous. And it's constantly going back to the drawing board and seeing what does this child need, and making sure the child is learning, that they're not working hard and just spinning their wheels.
Absolutely. And again, that check-in point is about gathering more information. Like you're saying, you're seeing what's working. Do we need to do something differently? Do we need to use a different program? So it's really an opportunity. So if a child is not progressing, it's an opportunity to try something else, whether that's a different program, whether that's increasing the intensity of the intervention. I've seen kids who have struggled with attention and reading, but parents have decided, well, let's just watch the attention for now. Let's focus on the reading. But the reason why they're not benefiting from the reading intervention is because the inattention is getting in the way. And so then they decide, okay, maybe we need to work on both of these at the same time, or address the attention in order for the child to better be able to pay attention to the reading intervention. And so again, it's an opportunity to have communication with the team, to regroup, to make modifications to the intervention plan, and then regroup again and see what's working. Because I think the goal hasn't changed. The goal is still to help that child thrive, help that child achieve their full potential, and to learn. And we just are looking at different ways to do that most effectively.
Yeah. And, I'm glad you brought up, Karen, the issue of attention. I've quite often seen children who really struggle with attention and struggle to learn to read. And when that attentional piece is taken care of, all of a sudden you see the reading really take a jump.
Absolutely. I've seen that too. And it seems like if there is an attention issue, it helps with so many other things with writing, because you can stay longer with a task. And we know that writing requires a lot of attention, divided attention, inhibiting distractors, organization, planning, all of those things which are connected to that attention system. So
huge drain on executive functioning.
Absolutely. So we've talked about, again, this importance between that parent and those educators, the teachers, the school administrators. And it's really critical to, I think, again, to come together and to realize that everybody wants the same thing. And obviously they're going to go about achieving those goals and helping that child in different ways. What the parent is doing at home is going to be different than what the teacher is doing in the classroom, what the therapist might be doing outside of the classroom or inside the classroom if it's school-based. But it sounds like the end goal and realizing that you're all working towards the same goal is so critical.
Yeah. Frequently we'd start meetings at my school by saying, here is team so-and-so, that we're on this child's team.
Yeah.
And we're really trying to help him or her really learn to the best of their ability.
And that's absolutely what we want.
Yeah, it is. They deserve it.
They do. Shelley, I think this conversation is going to help a number of parents and a number of educators who are working with kids, working with parents to help kids with learning or social emotional challenges thrive. And thank you so much for coming here and sharing this information and sharing your experience, because again, I think it's going to help a lot of parents and a lot of educators. What is the best way for people to connect with you if they want to learn more about the work that you do and how you support families?
Sure. You can go to my website. My company's called Schoolhouse Collaborative. So it's www.schoolhousecollab.com. And my email address is shelley@schoolhousecollab.com.
Wonderful. And I will put all that information in the show notes for this episode. Shelley, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great seeing you.
Great seeing you, Karen.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.